Today, Brian and I are here with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. He is the author of the book Toward a Meaningful Life and founder of the Meaningful Life Center. And he's here to talk to us today about, well, obviously meaning, but how to interact civilly during these challenging times. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to your book, the center? What is it, what led you here?
Sure. I have an actually interesting story. I grew up in a very, called Hasidic Orthodox Jewish community, where I went to religious school 12 hours a day, very intense, scholarship, focused, and so on. But the good news is that I also did not grow up in a dogmatic home. My father was actually a journalist. So it was a very open-minded home. Ideas were always welcome. Skepticism was invited. So I had this rare combination of having very strong traditional value system roots, but at the same time, the luxury to spread my wings and really explore and read. Very often religion is very much connected to certain conformity. I had very nonconformist parents, and it really worked well for me. I don't know how it would have worked out if it wasn't that way. So as a teenager, and I went through my own journey as everybody goes through, in retrospect, I could call myself at the time, I was like a rebel without a cause. And approximately around 17, 18 years old, I began to identify very much with the mystical and the spiritual teachings that are quite universal. And it was like music to my ears. When you're a 17, 18-year-old and you hear music that touches your soul, it like captured me. I never looked back. Today I'm 63 years old. I don't mean today, I mean now I'm 63 years old. And I committed my life to being, I'd like to say, part of the solution instead of being part of the problem, and trying to address the challenges of our time using these universal spiritual, I like to call them psychological, psycho-spiritual, psychological, spiritual ideas. And thank God I've been very successful in the sense of reaching many people. I really try to speak from my heart. I have no dogma to preach. I really believe that all of us, no matter what background, no matter what race, no matter what color, we all have a divine element to our spirits. And actually the founding fathers of this country captured it well when they said I'd like to say all people are created equal, but all people are created equal and have inalienable or unalienable rights. And that lies at the heart of my whole mission. So I wrote a book called Toward a Meaningful Life, exactly that, how to bring deeper meaning into your life instead of living a superficial life based on surface level pleasures and instant gratification, to really live up to, just like a business needs a mission statement, each one of us needs our personal calling, our personal mission. And as an outgrowth of the book, which was first published by William Morrow in 1995, we founded the Meaningful Life Center by the same name. That was really a response to a lot of demand for more material, for more resources. And especially since this pandemic broke, I can't tell you, the last 6, 7 months, I probably did more work than I did in the last 6 years, simply because there's a vulnerability and a receptivity that is really unprecedented as people's outer lives are disrupted, schedules, summer plans, school, you name it, entertainment, sports. I mean, there's no sector that hasn't been impacted. So it's really, I've been trained for this moment, I can say. And that brings me here. Here I am.
I have a question. You mentioned your dad was a journalist, correct? So do you think that had a lot to do with you actually wanting to write this book, or some inspiration for you to write, or even the skill, that you learned maybe from your dad?
Absolutely. My father was a very good writer. I'm envious of the ability, the way he was able to write, but then he told me, trust me, it's the same struggle I have. So there's no question. I mean, he had, besides the skill of writing, it was also that he had that passion about the human condition. When you're passionate about people and about their challenges and their joys and their sorrows, you just write differently. And I learned a lot from that because he was a person of great empathy, but at the same time, a broad thinker. So there's no question. I mean, by osmosis and by just watching him, you get older, you start appreciating your parents more. especially my father. He was very dynamic. And what I really learned most about from him was just something really, I think, fascinating, was non-judgmentalism. He was the most non-judgmental person I ever met. Like, he just didn't have it in him. He didn't even have to work on it. He just saw people, and he could completely disagree with someone and completely be respectful. And actually, as a journalist, he later became an editor of a newspaper. He would print columns that were completely, they were actually offensive to him even. I don't mean anything obscene or anything hurtful, but like that were really antithetical. And I learned a lot about, you don't have to be wrong for me to be right, basically. Right. So yes, it definitely impacted my my writing, even my commitment to just trying to be of help in some way in this crazy world.
So you touched on this a little bit just now, but it's not a secret. You know, we're very divided as a country right now. And, you know, one of the things that you do is you provide a refreshing approach to, you know, dealing with crisis in the country. Now, so my question is, how should we be approaching conversations that are uncomfortable with people that we don't necessarily agree with, you know, so that we can have real discussions instead of arguing, which I feel like we're all doing?
I have to say, Nicolette, the first thing is I'm pained, I'm sure as you are, just to see it. I mean, human beings, we're all in the same boat. Mm-hmm. We all are vulnerable creatures. We all want happiness and joy and love in our lives. And we all are vulnerable to this COVID-19. It's a terrible, it's a tragedy, actually, that we can't find the things that are in common, even if we have fundamental disagreements. Mm-hmm. You don't even hear conversation. You know what? Let's talk about what we agree about. Mm-hmm. And then let's talk about what we disagree. It's all about the disagreement. So I think the first thing is to distinguish between the two. Let's just find out, let's for argument's sake in our conversation now, we find out you love Trump and I hate Trump. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, I'm or the other way around. Right. Or we're neutral, or we have some other issue we fundamentally disagree about. Mm-hmm. But there's so much we agree about. I mean, there's things that really matter to you, to myself. So I think the first thing is you have to control your life. Don't become a herd mentality where you just go along with whatever others are saying because it sounds good or because whatever the reason is. There's a lot of politics involved. It's very even difficult to know a lot of facts. But let's, for argument's sake, you have a very strong opinion. Is there nothing you and I can find in common that we can talk about? Do you love your spouse? You love your children? Would you like to live a healthier life? I mean, the fact that it's become so black and white, like almost like cowboys and Indians, if it wasn't so tragic, it would be like comical. Right. Like I know the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees, other rivalries. I think a lot of that has become like like it's almost like a wrestling match. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that needs to be. You need to take responsibility for yourself and say, "Am I going to have a conversation that's only confrontational and only divisive? Is there anything that I can find in common?" And to start blaming everybody else, no, you have to look at yourself. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. You're either part of an argument or you're part of creating something more closeness. That's one thing. The second thing is the demonizing of personality. I can disagree with you, but why would I have to character assassinate you? Right. Why do I have to say that you're the worst person on earth? You're Hitler or whatever it is. Why can't we have a discussion? Fine. Fundamental disagreement about certain policies or certain matters, whatever it may be. But why demonize? I don't want you to demonize me, and I won't demonize you. And finally, one third point I would make here is that this is more taken from the mystical tradition, and this is true whether it's Jewish or Buddhist or Christian or Muslim or frankly secular spirituality, and that is that that each of us are part of one larger organism. We know today, especially in physics and in nature and environment, look at your own human body. Let's see, would your right arm ever consider fighting with the left arm, even if they have different approaches? There's a certain synergy and synchronicity. And if we understand that we're really fundamentally all part of one, so if you looked at me as your brother and I see you as my sister, I mean, I have family, I have siblings, I don't agree with everything they say. We have very fundamental disagreements, but it's part of who I am. So if we were able to really see ourselves in that light, then our disagreements are fine. That's the diversity, doesn't need to lead to divisiveness and to war. Those are some key points that I would just put on the table. Obviously, it's easier said than done, because I don't think anyone would disagree with what I just said, but they still can't seem to implement it.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think that social media plays a role in some of this?
You know, technology, I don't know if you recall in the beginning of the internet, the beginning of this new technology, there was a line they used to use: junk in, junk out. You know, I think technology is neutral. You can use it for destructive purposes and you can use it for constructive purposes. Mm-hmm. Like social media, I use social media all the time, but it's only messages of love, of hope, of courage, mm-hmm. of resilience. And unfortunately, at the same time, social media amplifies. If you put junk in, mm-hmm. hate or divisiveness or racism or other destructive forces, it amplifies it. It's like a megaphone that amplifies it so many times more. So I think it really comes down to what you use it for. I would not be the one that says, hey, let's cut out all social media and technology because it can create so much havoc, as we see, right. Especially in a political election season. So I'll just cite a very powerful Talmudic statement. It says, where one of the pagans said to one of the great sages, he says, if God didn't want to have idolatry in this world, why didn't he destroy the sun and the moon? So there wouldn't be sun worshipers and moon worshipers. So the sage responds, do you think God is going to destroy the world because there's some fools who misunderstand? Mm-hmm. So some of the commentaries ask, so why didn't he follow up with the question, why didn't God destroy the fools? And the answer obviously is because we have free will. So you look at a kitchen knife, it can be used to cut bread, and for constructive purposes, it can be used to stab someone, God forbid. Mm-hmm. So that's how I see it.
Same with social media. So why get rid of the technology that could be, used for good just because people use it for...
It's still a challenge, because do you allow everything on social media? Should there be any rules? Does the First Amendment apply that anybody can say anything they like? Can it be manipulated? It's not a black and white issue. I just of the belief that you want to change the people, not the machines they use.
Right.
Do you think more people are apt to say things that are, I mean, obviously if you're saying it on social media, because it's more anonymous, that people are more apt sometimes, or it can be anonymous or not in person. So they feel like it's just more going out there than, saying something they wouldn't necessarily say to another human being.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I know people who live vicariously. They have a second identity, the person they want to be, not the person who they are. So besides the fact that they can be hurtful to others, they're also not living up to be accountable because they're living anonymously. There was a site I remember called Second Life or something like that. You pay thousands of dollars.
I've heard of that.
You were aware of that?
Mm-hmm. I've heard of it.
It's like you pay thousands of dollars to become a second life. Like, you want to be you're a short, 5-foot pudgy guy. You want to be a 6-foot dashing, sexy individual. You develop that identity and you're living out there in a fantasy land. Of course, it leads to a lot of problems. I mean, because let's be honest. What do they say? Now no one's going to baseball games. But the joke used to go is that 60,000 people who need to lose weight are watching 18 people who are in good shape. A lot of sports has become very spectator oriented, voyeuristic even. I know people who are addicted to soap operas, complete fiction, but they live their lives vicariously. This is obviously not healthy. Is it the worst thing possible? I'm not going to say this is the root of all evil, obviously, but you're right. Yeah, social media can create, besides the predators and all the other destructive elements, it creates a false reality. How many friends do you have on Facebook as if they're really your friends, who they are? It creates an illusion. I've been doing Zoom as you have been doing, but at the end of the day, there's nothing like sitting face to face, eye to eye, heart to heart, soul to soul in a warm conversation, to be honest. Even though I feel we're doing it as much as we can, but I think that technology is also depersonalizes things. And it's a gray area. There's no black and white here. I think there are great gifts that technology provides, and there are great traps. I think if we educate our children to see technology like another tool chest,
Mhm.
You don't become your hammer or your screwdriver or your automobile or your bicycle. These are tools. These are tools for you to become a better person, to grow. I think if we educate our youth from the youngest age, which, technology is part of our lives, it's like a given. It's no longer a luxury.
Mhm.
It has to be used and harnessed in that way. And it has its innate challenges. It's part of life.
Yeah. So there's something else you talk about, blueprint. Where is it? A blueprint for modern day life. Can we talk a little bit about that? What do you mean by that?
I mentioned before a mission statement. I like to use business examples because everybody relates to that. In Business 101, you must have a mission statement or a vision statement, and then you lay out your strategic plan and how you're going to execute it and implement it. You go to investors, you're starting a startup company, or you want more capital for your growing company, they need to see this. No one's giving you a penny if they don't see a focused mission and a focused plan, and who's your team and your assets and what are your strengths and liabilities. So if business sees that as the key to success, and they won't even look at you if you don't have any of that business plan, let's apply that to our lives. How successful can your life be if you're just a victim? I don't say victim, a product of circumstances. Whatever comes your way. You have a game plan. Like, what would you like your life to look like in a year from now, 5 years from now? What do you project?
Right.
And what is your mission statement? Like, what would you consider to be your calling in this world? And even giving it thought is already a good beginning. Many people I share this with, they say, it's a very good question.
Yeah.
So I think a blueprint for life really means, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not talking about a perfect plan, but at least there's a strategy. Like right now, this pandemic has upended so many of us. Now, those that have a certain blueprint, they have their game plan, so, okay, fine. We have to learn to navigate in these uncertain waters. But people whose entire lives were based on what restaurant I'm going out to this week, or what travel plans, or so-called the more institutions and structure, the security blankets and comfort zones have been really thrown for a very difficult. And as time passes, it's taking its toll because they don't really have a blueprint. I mean, I've been speaking about this a lot of late because I say, listen, the trees that stand strong in the middle of a storm are the ones that were built strong. But that doesn't mean you can't begin building wherever you are. And blueprint really is laying out, what are your values? What do you stand for? What would you like the world to see you as once you're gone? Real important, the enduring and more eternal questions. Each of us in our own way, without any preconceived notions. I'm not preaching any religion here or any faith. I think every person needs some form of plan like that, or else you become someone that's just going with the flow. Whatever happens, you become reactive instead of proactive. Maybe that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I never thought about like sort of reading your life like you would do a company. I mean, even though hopefully most of us know where we want to go and where we want to be, but I think the biggest thing, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, is even when you sort of have that blueprint, sometimes it's okay for it to change as you go along, right?
Of course. Listen, there are always foundational elements in any blueprint, but it has to always leave room for expansion and flexibility and adjusting. I'll just use myself as a guinea pig, if I may, as an example. When I was, as I mentioned, I was 17, 18. I can't say I had a mission in my mind exactly crystallized. I was still a kid. But looking back, I realized I have a skill of communication, writing, and I wanted to use it in some way to bring some spiritual higher consciousness to this world. So that never changed. As I am today, I still do the same thing. What's different is what the message is. The times have changed. Like now, you have to deal with the issues that are the presenting issue. You can't talk about things 30 years ago. And what's also changed is the tools, technology. I began with a typewriter. But there are certain fundamental elements in a good mission. When they say a mission statement, they always say it has to be unique, and it has to also be short, and it has to serve something greater than yourself. So even the biggest companies like Google's mission statement is to organize all the information in the world and make it readily accessible, something like that. Now they make billions of dollars, but they don't write in their mission it's to make billions of dollars and to be powerful and so on. because that's, first of all, that's generic. Every company should be doing that. They find something that's not about them. It's serving a need of human beings. So as long as Google can, and this is not an ad for Google. I hope, I have no connection with them. So just using it as an example.
Influencer.
And they don't need my publicity anyway, So my point I'm saying is, as long as they continue to provide good results, search results, we'll continue using it. Mm-hmm. So at the same thing on a personal level, it's like almost, I actually have a formula, if I may. And if you go on my site, meaningfullife.com, I spell it out more. I have a formula. It's called POP plus P plus H equals your mission. I'll spell it out. If you look at your unique personality, P, your unique opportunities, unique, the people you know, the places you've been to, and then you add plus passion, your passion. What are you passionate about? Plus higher purpose. It has to have something greater than, oh, I just want to be rich, or I want to be happy, or I want to travel everywhere, or I want to have 30 cars. That if you can really do a good soul search and a good evaluation of those elements, personality, opportunities, people, places, passion, plus some higher purpose, you will find yourself more or less the direction, at least, of your mission. And as you said, that it will ultimately adjust in different situations.
But it's the core. Is that kind of what you meant when you were talking about the, moving away from that superficial life that we were talking about? And I think this ties into what you were talking about with the, the people who live their lives based on where they're going to eat, where they're going to go, and that superficial life. They're really struggling right now during this time where we can't be so superficial because they don't have that inner anything.
I agree totally. I mean, look, if your entire game plan and security was built on, let's say, the plans you made back in February, I mean, come on. None of us can do anything we thought we can do. Right. Summer travel, entertainment, schooling. We don't even know what's happening next week, frankly. It could be another lockdown, and depending what state you're in, and then the politics of it all just creates even more confusion. And so the only thing that really can give you some peace of mind is when you look inside and say, okay, 1 second, who do I love? Mm-hmm. I'll just give you an example, if I may. I spoke at a Zoom talk I gave a few months ago around, I think it was May, to public school students, 2,500 public school students from different districts. It was a Zoom talk. And I asked the students, and they all on the Zoom, they typed in the chat. I said, tell me, what were the 3 most important things in your life back in January 2020? And more or less, there's the same answers. These were teenagers. So some said sexuality, finding a good job, sports, video games. That was the gist. I said, now, if I asked you now, what are the 3 or 4 most important things? None of the 4 came up. It was who do I love? What do I stand for? What will allow me to get through this and become a stronger person? Mm-hmm. It was interesting how it completely shifted, because we did live in a very comfortable life and nothing disrupted it. We thought we're invulnerable. Mm-hmm. Now, I hope this awareness will remain with us, even as this, at some point, will be conquered, the pandemic. But it's interesting what happens when your so-called, as I mentioned, security blankets and comfort zones are taken from you. You're either left really lost and naked, or you dig deeper and find what you stand for. Maybe that's the time. Now is the time for it.
Yeah.
Do you think also, I mean, to your point, do you think people also start understanding who they are when times are a little tougher? They start what they're made out of, I guess you would say, or...
Yeah, I mean, Warren Buffett put it this way. He said about investments in general, he says, when the tide is out, you see who's been swimming naked. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the world of recovery and healing and addiction, they will all talk about this. Anyone that's gone through drug or alcohol or sex or gambling addictions will tell you when they hit rock bottom and they see their lives are falling apart, they discover parts of themselves. That's the only place to turn to, because their regular conventional security blankets are not there for them.
Right.
So I think it's definitely, why it should be that way is a good mysterious question. Why do we need to, I think Leonard Cohen said it this way. He said, forget your perfect offering. Everyone has cracks. It's how the light gets in. The cracks in our lives and the challenges are ultimately where we discover ourselves. That's the fact. As long as you're in your comfort zone or in the comfort zone of your parents and your environment without the things that you are so used to, you take it for granted. It usually creates more apathy and not that type of crystallized vision. What are you ready to fight for?
Right.
Let's be honest, since World War II, this country for sure, I mean, I was born here in the United States. I'm a baby boomer from the 50s. But what did we fight for the last 50, 60 years? The biggest fights are, again, what I said before, sports or some other things. It's a blessing, but the blessing also creates a complacency. When was the last time we had to fight? I don't mean fight to death, thank God, but I mean to fight with that type of absolute unwavering commitment for a value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, do you think that, so despite all of this chaos going on and all the disagreement and the unrest, do you think that, and you kind of mentioned this, do you think that there are ways that we've come together more as a country, even despite all, on the outside, it looks like we're very divided, but have people been coming together maybe in their communities or, in some way?
Look, I'm a big believer in divide and conquer. To try to solve all our problems at once, especially the hotheads who are very invested or very radical, I would not go there initially. I think we have to find the people, and I think the silent majority of this country could sit down around a lunch or a Zoom lunch and have a civil conversation. I think the problem is that the ones on the margins, the loudest voices are the radical ones.
Mm-hmm.
And they're dominating. And they in turn are forcing us all to have to take sides. Or if you don't take a side, it means if you don't agree with me, it means you're my enemy. I think we have to find those of us, the communities or individuals that can have conversations like we're doing right now. I don't even know what your position is. Mm-hmm. And frankly, even if I found out, I don't think it would change the vibes or the climate of our conversation. So my point is, that's what I think we need to do. It's like untangling a very tight, tangled yarn. Mm-hmm. You take the edges, the places that you can untangle, the low-hanging fruit, mm-hmm. You work on that, and slowly, if we can build a consensus of disagreeing civilly, mm-hmm. and not personalizing and demonizing, I think it will also shine more of a glaring light on those that are, frankly, want to create divisiveness. That's how I see it. Let them be isolated. Why should 330 million in the country be held hostage? Be held hostage by these extreme voices, and I mean it both on the left and the right. I'm not saying anything here that is suggesting one side over another. To me, it's everybody. We're all humans, and we're all equal, as I said.
I agree.
That's why I commend you. To be honest, your program and this conversation is very refreshing, and this is the way it should be. I've been on shows, by the way. There's been a lot of tension where people were very aggressive. I never engaged in that. I just deflected it because I didn't want to become part of the fuel of the fire. But I mean, and you hope that, look, your listenership, and I'm sure all the listeners are, but people will hear this and hopefully they can carry the message. Mm-hmm. And I say it to each one of your listeners and viewers, take this in some way, let it have pay it forward, right. A ripple effect. Make sure in your community, in your home, in your environment, in your sphere of influence, make sure conversations are civil. And if they're not, get out of it. You don't have to be in an argument. You just pull yourself out. I'm not going to go argue with someone I know. I've been around, I have some experience. I know people who argue, you're not getting anywhere. No matter what you say, they're never going to agree with you. So what's the point? You get caught up. And I mean, you ask the other person, tell me, is it possible your opinion would change? So they often tell me, would your opinion change? I say, let's start with a clean slate, and maybe we shouldn't have any strong opinions. Let's hear each other out, and maybe our opinions will change. But that alone is, if you can get that in, that would also be a good idea.
Yeah, because if you're not willing to listen, right, you can't have the conversation.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Yep. Well, Brian, is there anything else you wanted to add before
No.
we wrap up? Thank you so much for giving us this, we needed some positive conversation in the midst of all this chaos. So thank you so much for leaving us with this. And, please let everybody know where they can learn more about you, your book, the Meaningful Life Center.
So first, I want to thank you for creating the platform, the environment. I mean, it's a joy to speak to you. Your questions are right on. And the goal really is, I think we share this. We can get this message out to as many people as possible. I really believe in the butterfly effect, ripple effect, whatever you call it. Mm-hmm. So the way to get to me, I'm pretty accessible. I mentioned www.meaningfullife.com /subscribe. You can actually get a daily short, I call them spiritual antidotes or inspiration, like a type of soul vitamin to help flex our spiritual and psychological muscles. Spiritual self-care, let's call it that. So meaningfullife.com is our website, but if you /subscribe, you actually can choose something to subscribe to. And I'm open to anyone having follow-up questions. If you want to ask a question or in any other way that I could be of help. To me, there's no greater gift and blessing to be able to intersect with the dignified journey of another soul, whoever it may be. Whether I agree or disagree with the person is irrelevant in that regard. What connects us as souls is deeper than what disconnects us in our opinions. That's how I see it. And and again, thank you so much. It's really been very nice to be here with you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.